Welcome back, everyone, to the Bank Customer Experience Podcast. As always, I'm Bradley Cooper. I'm the moderator of today's podcast, and I'm joined once again by the great gentleman from Cook Solutions Group. We're joined by Scott Fieber, who you've seen a lot of on the podcast, but we also have a new face here with Austin Smith. Great to have you guys on.
Yeah,
Thank you for having us.
Excellent. So today we're talking about check imaging, some trends regarding check usage, as well as check imaging fraud and how maybe to prevent that. So just to kind of start us off, let's ask a question. Where do you think checks in general are going in coming years? Because, I mean, we've seen some data that maybe they're slipping quite a bit compared to other payments, but what do you guys think?
Yeah, at least from what I'm seeing, again, a lot of it's speculative, right? I think it's fun to kind of look at the banking industry in general. I mean, we've seen the same conversation around like branches, like are branches going away? Is cash going away? Is digital going to be the only option? And then, something happens the next year, we're questioning everything again, right? I think COVID increased, cash usage quite a bit. We still see customers building branches, again, depending on the segment, more than they have in years past. I think with check imaging, from what we've seen, it really depends on the channel and the use case behind it. I think the daily user, like you and I, are probably going to see that continue to decrease. We've seen even the government, send out some notices that they're trying to eliminate it as well. But from a business perspective, it still seems like it's pretty steady. So from my perspective, again, I don't have a crystal ball on it, but it seems like it is going to be a little dynamic. It's going to be interesting to see that. I think we'll talk more on the fraud side here throughout the podcast, but I think that might play a game into it because I think we all have this preconceived notion that digital is the best option always, but we also see probably more fraud there than we do anything else right now. We'll talk about Zelle and some of those other pieces that have been out there. It's supposed to be like the savior of payments, and yet they seem to be a massive headache too with how fraudsters are attacking it. So I don't know, maybe it's a spot where maybe we do see a resurgence in checks because people are fed up with the fraud that we're seeing. I don't know. But the cool thing about it, I would say, is it is a generally adopted channel between the X937 file that we don't have that commonality elsewhere. And so that does have something to kind of say for itself. But beyond that, I think it's anyone's guess at this point from my side.
Yeah, and I think like I was doing some reading beforehand, and something like 70% of businesses still rely on checks for B2B payments. So like Scott was saying, maybe for the average like individual or consumer, checks might not be as big of a thing, but for businesses, certainly it's still, a huge method of payment. And I think obviously there's more methods nowadays than ever before, but it seems like checks is still there and still strong.
Yeah.
Sure. And to kind of build on what you mentioned about Zelle. So Zelle typically has more fraud than checks. Do you think consumers might make a move back towards paper checks in time due to that increased digital fraud that we're seeing more of?
Yeah, I think it's hard to generalize it, right? Because I think based off of age demographic, again, use cases, your sort of lifestyle. It was funny, just my personal preference. Like I don't remember the last time I wrote a check forever, and then we moved out of state to where our bank or credit union wasn't there, and so my access to cash was more limited than it usually was.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found myself writing checks to like babysitters and such because they didn't have a phone yet, so they couldn't take digital. And so I was like, it was weird from my lens. Like, man, I felt like I took a step back and started using it. And then, as life kind of shifts and evolves, it kind of changes there. But, I think the Zelle fraud and even just digital payment fraud and, as a whole, not just to pick on Zelle, but you definitely see with older demographics, that's a bigger concern for fraud. But then again, I think it's a little easier from a general fraud perspective to use the checks, right? So I think it's just going to vary personally on where that channel is, who the end user is, and kind of what that looks like. But I think that's also on us as companies that develop the platforms for check imaging to put the right rigor around it to give these banks and credit unions more tools and I think resources to prevent that. Because again, like we said earlier, like it's a commonly adopted channel, right? So with that being said, it is easier to stop and detect certain things where, Zelle is a brand new channel all in itself. And so as these different channels of payment systems and fintechs pop up, it just adds different layers of risk, but also adds different layers of ways that fraudsters have to figure out to get around too. So there's kind of a double-edged sword, I think, in both ways, in a good way and in a bad way when it comes to fraud.
Great points. Now, I want to move a little bit to talk about ATM. So, ATMs, a lot of them now are accepting checks. Are ATMs seeing the majority of check deposits these days, or are we still seeing that mainly happen within the branch, in your opinion?
I would say we're probably seeing more of it actually via digital, so like in mobile deposits through your phone. Again, to Austin's point, a lot of businesses are using it, so they call remote deposit capture, like a scanner at the branch, not the branch, but at the business, accounts payable section, accounts receivable, things like that. So, yeah, I think whether you call it the cool thing or not cool thing with checks is it can be used in a number of different ways, right? Whether it is in the branch, whether it is via phone, whether it's through the ATM or whether it's through RDC or something else. We're seeing a lot of it. I think from our space, we live in the ATM world. And so, yeah, I mean, a lot of the machines that we're selling today, in fact, all of them are coming with check deposit scanners built into them. So that's standard in every ATM and ITM that we sell today. And from the most part, again, for most of our banks, credit unions that are working with it, they see those deposits still coming in very steadily from cash and check.
Right. Great points. Now, I want to ask a little bit about what are some of the ways people might commit check fraud with ATMs? Is that something that can possibly be done? What do you think?
Yeah, where do we start, right? There's a lot there.
Yeah.
Most common piece is just duplicates, right? And I think sometimes it's even an honest fraud mistake, right?
Sure.
Because mobile deposits are so easy. Like you take your phone at your house, you scan your check, and then my wife may find it, and then she doesn't know about it, and then she deposits at an ATM, and I haven't realized it's already been deposited, right?
Mm,
So just because the mobile device doesn't physically take the check and hold on to it, it lays around. That's an easy option. Where in the ATM world, it takes it, it keeps it. So there's no option for it to kind of duplicate it that way. So I think that's probably one of the more common issues. Again, it's not necessarily nefarious acts. It's just,
hmm
it's an easy way to do it. Again, fraudsters have tracked onto that too, though, where they say, hey, I know I can do a double take here, especially if funds
Yeah.
availability are there, where I can deposit on my phone and then do it again at the ATM and even do cash back immediately, or even in the branch, right? So that's, I think, probably one of the more common fraud pieces is just people using checks and doing duplicate deposits with it.
hmm
I think we probably all have seen the movie, I forget what it's called, but where he was actually printing his own checks, writing those
Sure.
off, and then doing that. Was it Catch Me If I Can? I think is it.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
Catch me
sounds
if
about
you
right.
can.
True story, right? Kind of cool, but a little more old school, I think, from the fraud side of there. But I think most of the time it's, people, again, writing bad checks, knowing their institutions hold methods intimately, and then figuring out how much
hmm
cash they can get immediately and then using it that way. We've also seen people where they'll open up a new account, right? And then from there, try to deposit a check and then do a withdrawal immediately to try to get the cash out as fast as you can. And again, if banks aren't buttoned up on their processes and procedures for funds availability, withholds policies, things like that, sometimes they can get caught holding that risk. But again, it's a fine balance between having a good customer experience and
hmm
being so leveraged against fraud that people can't get their cash for weeks because it's all in a hold status, right?
Right.
And I mean, honestly, I don't know if you want to kind of talk through what we've done. I think we've done some interesting pieces of trying to balance that, just with building rules engines and things like that into our
Yeah.
platform to help.
Yeah. Because, like you said, I think it's all about risk tolerance and the risk you want to accept versus, having a good, offering a good consumer experience. And I think what we've found just being in this business and offering, our own products around it is that every customer of ours sort of does things a little bit differently, has their own unique process for how they want to handle check imaging, and they all have their own risk tolerances. So for us, what we've done is in our check imaging product, we've basically built an extremely flexible, dynamic, sort of like IFTTT style rules engine, that allows us to create very specific custom rules per customer. So that way each of our customers can sort of set up their own rules that match their particular risk criteria, um, so that they can sort of flag stuff down in the exact way that they want to. And like Scott said, hopefully have a good balance between, what they're willing to risk versus, they're making their consumers happy.
Sure. And just to kind of expand on that, so can you talk a little bit more about how Cook Solutions Group is involved in check imaging and what brought you to developing that solution?
Yeah, I can answer the latter part of that if you want to talk about what we do,
Yeah.
Austin. But I think it's in the name, right? Cook Solutions Group. So we try really hard to help our customers figure out the different solutions to their complex problems, right? So oftentimes banks or credit unions will come to us saying, "Hey, I've got this problem, whether it's an employee or customer or member experience issue, whether it's a platform creep, whether it's antiquated systems, you name it." And check imaging kind of continued to bubble up for years there, where there just wasn't a good solution in the marketplace, from our opinion and from our customer side, that kind of checked all the boxes. Right, was the right price point for what they needed. It wasn't overly complex to install and maintain. The ongoing cost wasn't outrageous. But then, to Austin's point earlier, it was dynamic and modern enough to adjust with a changing consumer and a changing fraud landscape. And so yeah, we fiddled around with a number of different solutions for years and just weren't always super happy with what was available. So that's when we kind of said, you know what, let's do our own thing. Let's kind of build within our ecosystem and help this get to where it needs to be a check imaging system of 2025. And so yeah, we're pretty proud of what we've done, and so a lot of things are unique. Like Austin mentioned, this rules engine is very unique. Being completely cloud native and all that we do with our check imaging platform is there. But I don't know, Austin, you want to kind of dig deeper into
Yeah. No, I think, like you said, I think
he built it. So
yeah, no, I think, we identified this process and sort of saw the gaps. And, I think what we try to do when we do develop solutions is put our own twist on it, is kind of what we say. And we saw a few areas, I think, that we could put our twist on the check imaging process. Particularly when it comes to the review process, like I mentioned, that flexible dynamic rules engine being one of them, but then also being able to integrate with things like AI, computer vision for extracting data from the check images, like automatically pulling out certain relevant information, like CAR and LAR and that kind of thing. But then also we have an integration with our own video system. So in our platform, as you're reviewing check transactions, you can actually pull up a video clip of that same transaction that you're reviewing and watch the person performing that transaction with the simple click of a button. And then, like Scott said, we are fully serverless, in cloud, using Azure microservices. And I think that's an approach we took, 5 years ago or something like that, that I think at the time, a lot of our competitors weren't really willing to take that step at the time. And I think now you're seeing that that's the direction that everyone's going in. So we're sort of ahead of the curve there, but doing that allows us to sort of be very agile in what we do and build, and bring in integrations, and bring in these, like the AI and stuff like that we have integrated. So it really allows us to be flexible and sort of stay ahead of the curve. If we push a fix to our environment, it's deployed to all of our customers at once, since we're in a multi-tenant cloud environment, instead of server by server having to deploy that upgrade, and maybe it's slightly different for every customer. And so I think we've just tried to sort of set ourselves up with a modern solution, set up for the future.
Right. That's a really great point. So I want to talk a little bit about something you mentioned a little bit earlier, which is kind of that struggle between the funds availability versus preventing fraud. So how can financial institutions keep up with evolving customer demands from either both of those ends, from giving them their funds availability as soon as they can while also preventing fraud? Because it is a fine balance, as both of you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back to that. It's all about offering a solution that fits every customer's specific needs, which I think is really what we've tried to do here. Like I was saying earlier, I think what we found is that every customer sort of wants to do this in a slightly different way. And so we've built our product with that in mind, really. We try to be very accommodating, I think, to different customer requirements. A lot of the times, if we're onboarding a new customer, they have a new thing that we haven't heard of before, right? A new way that they want to see it done, that they require for their process. And so we really do try to take that all in and incorporate that stuff into our product, but in a scalable way, where it's still manageable and maintainable for us. And that's sort of the approach we've tried to take, is building sort of a very solid foundation that allows us to tack on these additional requirements that we may see from new customers, in terms of how they want to do it, or how they want to specifically see their process or their review process, or whatever the case may be. and just tried to remain agile and flexible so that we can change and sort of, keep up with the times and changing requirements and that sort of thing.
Yeah, we've given our customers a huge head start, I think, in just tracking because of that nimbleness behind it, right? Like it's just take like machine learning, for example, and just being able to even track with the computer vision that he was talking about too, because everything's cloud native, we can start looking for different trends. We can start looking for different rules. We can do a lot of unique things in the cloud that you can't necessarily do with an on-premise type solution, right? So we can get very granular to say, hey, I see Bradley Cooper deposits $1,000 check every April 30th around this time via this ATM. That's common behavior. That might give us more risk tolerance to allow that funds availability to happen immediately versus like, hey, Austin just came in for the first time, just opened up an account. I really don't know who he is. He's trying to do a cash out withdrawal in this check. Like, man, maybe we should ought to put a look at that before we issue the funds, right? So, but the same thing is like, yeah, I mean, it can get crazy, obviously, with AI, from even tracking signatures to the MICR reading and all the different pieces and tools that are out there. But I think what we love most about being cloud native on our conveyance application is that we can also leverage innovations from other companies, right? We don't have to be everybody and do everything. If someone does a really good job at image compare, right, or someone does a really good job at the CAR-LAR reading like Austin was talking about, we can leverage that, build it into our stack and go, right, versus trying to build it from the ground up. Or then trying to go to every single customer and do a costly professional services engagement to upgrade to that current, software they want to see. We can deploy that quickly, just like an app on your phone, right? So I don't know. I think there's definitely steps there. There's obviously layers to it. We love that type of an approach on everything that we do. And that's the twist that we provide that Austin mentioned, is doing it a little differently. But again, we're not doing it just because we think it. We're doing it because we're sitting side by side with our customers, reviewing these pains, reviewing these struggles, finding out what's complex about something that really should be pretty dang simple, and trying to find a way to simplify it for them and make their lives a little easier.
Sure. Yeah, and that leads right into my last question, which is, having this daily check auditing can be a real hindrance for employees. It takes a lot of time to do. What have you seen that can make this a more streamlined process for them without increasing risks? For example, having someone be able to slip in a fake check and, withdraw the money immediately.
I mean, I think, we're broken records here, but I think it comes down to just a lot of the stuff that we've talked about, incorporating some AI for automatic detection, incorporating, robust rules that you can really fine tune and tailor, so that you're really only reviewing the stuff that matters, the stuff that you need to be, but then also, like, I guess even back to what Scott was mentioning, our ability to sort of integrate with others pretty easily. I think one of the integrations we're working on right now is with AFS, Advanced Fraud Solutions, to integrate with their True Checks platform. So it's a check fraud detection system that leverages like a huge database of account level data to identify counterfeit or non-sufficient funds or closed accounts, duplicate items, all this kind of thing. So the ability to pull that in as just an extra layer, on top of your process to, to streamline and automate things.
Yeah, great points. Well, Austin and Scott, do you have anything else you'd like to add before we sign off for today? This is a really great discussion.
No, I think just in general, whether you're a bank or credit union out there listening in, I think check imaging, for whatever reason, has this cumbersome bad rap, and I totally empathize and sympathize with the employee, with the institution, because you're getting hit with a lot of stuff, right? And because of how checks are processed, right? You got that deadline at the end of the day. You've got a number of checks you got to review and or repair before you then approve it and send it off. Typically going off of very little information to make a judgment call on, do I remove the hold? Do I issue? Do I do whatever I need to do? And again, like at the end of the day, like our job here is to try to make that simplified, right? Like to Austin's point, if we can reduce the number of checks you have to review from 60% down to 1%, we're winning, right? If we can remove the number of checks that are being pushed through as fraud, down to a negligible number, that's a great thing, right? If we can increase the customer experience by getting them their cash a little bit quicker in a secure way, we're winning, right? If we can help keep the costs down, I mean, all those different pieces, we could keep an eye on it. And the cool thing about it is it's not impossible. This was something that, again, we had no business in, gosh, what, Austin, 2019, 2018, so 5, 6 years ago. And now I would say we're probably the leader in this space just because of the innovations and be able to leverage cloud technology and AI because we have the foundation, the roots built correctly, right? So, yeah, it's something that, again, if you're challenged with this, obviously give us a shout out. We're happy to talk with you and help out from there. But it's again, we're passionate about this space. We're passionate about our partners and our customers, and happy to help them out anytime we can.
Well, once again, it was great to have you on, Scott, as always. Great to have you on, Austin. And thank you so much for joining us on the
Yeah.
Bank Customer Experience Podcast. Great conversation, guys.
Until next
Yeah.
time.
Thank you
guys.
for having
Take care.
us. Bye.